So it's plain to see that there's a lot of interest in this topic. We've had a record amount of signups actually for this webinar, and it just goes to show that gamification really is a hot topic in e-learning at the moment. Particularly when it comes to mobile learning, it really pays to have learning that is gamified and enabled for interactivity. And that's what we like to do at EdApp. And so hopefully today I'm going to demonstrate two things. The utility of gamification in microlearning for both engagement and retention, and also the ability for you to include gamification that is directly baked into our platform at EdApp. So let's begin. So gamification in microlearning can happen in three ways in our platform. You can gamify all interactive templates, so that whether that's through the game templates themselves, so we do have some games in there like your common memory game, finder words, that sort of thing. We also have some unique games that are really great for a mobile interactivity and getting those touch interactions from your learners to boost engagement. But you can also gamify any template, and I'm going to show you how to do that by using timers and also by using star-based rewards. Speaking of rewards, we're also going to talk about pricing and how you can enable real rewards for your learners on our platform, and how that's going to motivate learners to retain information and to do your learning more readily. We're also going to talk about a couple of new features that are going to increase the gamification of your lessons, but are also just really groundbreaking features. So those are leaderboards and Brain Boost, which is our new spaced repetition feature. So we're going to gain an insight into all those today. So let's talk about why gamification is important. So initially, research has shown us that immediate feedback can increase learning effectiveness. So, that's been shown by Plashomer and Kinser, but it's also been shown by a number of other papers. So when done well, gamification has a really positive effect on learner engagement. Games are perceived as a low-risk way of building competence and confidence. So as opposed to a traditional question and answer where you might just get something wrong, gamification allows your learners to actually go back and try again and not lose that motivation and lose that flow that they initially gained. So let's talk about how gamification is baked into Ed. So the first way, and you can see these pictures on the right, the first way, the first mechanic, I suppose, is points. Now, points are given as a percentage at the end of the lesson. And immediately after receiving their score, learners are encouraged to go back and try again. So they can either go back immediately, or they can go back the next day or the next week and have another crack at the lesson and hopefully improve that score. And their top score is only ever shown. So they're never going to be reminded of that time that they failed a lesson. They're only going to be reminded of the positive times that they've actually gotten a passing grade. Additionally to the point system, we do have a star system. So stars are actually real rewards. They can only be earned once per lesson, but essentially they're an in-app currency that can be used to redeem prizes at the star bar. So I'm going to talk about all that and give you a demonstration of that in just a moment. But essentially you can give out real rewards, and any lesson becomes a game instantly just because of that within the platform, having those rewards built in. So as you can see on the right there, it reminds learners alongside their score how many stars they've earned this time, and it also lets them know how many stars were available. So it's giving that subtle nudge to go back and say, hey, I might finish this lesson again. And as you can see on the right as well, it's only going to show your best score. Learners are only ever going to be reminded that they've completed the lesson, how many stars they can earn, and what their best score was. So that's a key element of gamification, is not reminding learners of their past failures. It's only reminding them of how they can improve themselves. And of course, if they've gotten 100%, they can always go back and do it again, but they don't have to. They've already known that they've done their best. So this is the star bar on the right-hand side, where if a learner earns a star, they basically get a spin at the star bar. We have other interactions that aren't chance focused, so we have an auction interaction as well, if you choose to use that one. And when a learner claims their prize, they also are encouraged to give advice to other learners. So another way that learners can have their lessons gamified is through status and recognition. And one of the ways we do that is through levels and badging. So essentially, as a learner goes throughout the app, they earn little badges. So for example, after their first lesson, they'll actually earn a freshman badge. It'll pop up on their screen and let them know, hey, you've won a freshman badge for completing your first lesson. Then if they complete 3 lessons, they get the next level up. So they're encouraged to level up. And this is a classic mechanism from video games that you're probably familiar with if you've ever played something like Call of Duty or one of those first-person shooter games, or even a racing game or something like that, is that you move up and you gain experience points. Particularly more recently, we've seen things like Pokemon Go, where the levels just sort of go on forever. Ours do have a limit. We don't expect everyone to progress through the levels infinitely. However, with the levels, it does encourage learners to go in every day and try and better themselves and gain more badges. Another way that we gamify is through Brain Boost, and that gives a daily quiz. So you might be familiar with the application Duolingo, which encourages learners to come back every day and actually develop a streak and come back every day, and it tells them how many days in a row they've done their learning. It also gives them notifications every day and lets them know, if they're about to miss a day, or it lets them know that there's another quiz available for them. So Brain Boost is spaced repetition, and it's actually a uniquely generated quiz every day. From the author's perspective, they don't actually have to do anything. You just turn it on and you forget about it. Essentially, it's all there for the learner to boost engagement and to boost comprehension. We'll have a deeper look at that in just a moment. Another element, at the end of a Brain Boost quiz, they're obviously shown a score, much like they are in any other lesson. Additionally to that, we also have leaderboards, which pit learners against each other. And that dynamic is, of course, competition. What greater dynamic is there for encouraging learners to do well? So learners are going to be pitted against each other and told, hey, you might have gotten 277 points. You're the best in the team, or you're only second, or you're only third. And they're encouraged to go back. And that once again is based on their best score. We also have self-expression as a motivational mechanism. So we encourage our learners to share. So that's through peer learning and social learning. And we're about to introduce a new feature on top of peer learning, and that'll be in the next webinar. So keep an eye on your email inbox. But at the moment, we do have an integration with social learning, where essentially learners can leave a comment on any slide, and they'll also get notified when another person leaves a comment. So it's sort of a continual thread of interaction, and you can enable that on any slide. So as you can see here on the right, we've got our little comment thread there. So what you can do as an author is encourage people to go and comment and go in and interact with the team, and they'll be further motivated to perhaps discuss or go and revise or seek knowledge elsewhere, or share their best tips. So let's talk about flow. And flow is a really important aspect of gamification. So flow is basically the state in which you're so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. And I'm sure you've been in that state before. It might have been today at work. It might have been, just doing the lawn mowing on the weekend. Essentially, it's just a state of enjoyment. And what we're trying to do at EdApp is create an authoring tool that enables you to create a lesson that is most likely to get learners into that state of flow. So not only is the learning in the moment, but it's also gamified, and it's motivational with all these stars and points and encouraging learners to do their best, and badges and recognition. Flow occurs when the level of the task matches that person's capacities exactly. And one of the ways that's best to do that is through an analytics and constant revision of your lessons. Our platform makes that very easy as well to do through analyzing the data of your learners. And it also allows you to see, which questions are challenging and where you might have to make improvements. So, you've all heard the phrase, got to catch them all, and probably something to do with Pokemon Go in the past, or, but essentially that's what gamification boils down to. And it's all about getting your learners to do their best and getting your learners to be constantly motivated and constantly on the platform. And what we find is with our gamification mechanisms, our platform is super effective at doing that. And I'm going to just show you now some of the game templates themselves that we use in the platform. And I'll go through each one and briefly describe it. But if you do have any further questions, please just sign up for our free trial on our site. And I strongly encourage you to go in and just play with them on the authoring tool. You'll be able to see how fun these really are for learners. So the first one we have here on the right is a true-false game, where learners have to swipe left or right between the different facts and they can quickly say whether a fact is true or false just as soon as they've read it. Their score is shown up there on the top right, and they are constantly receiving that positive feedback loop if they get something right. And they don't actually have any feedback if they get it wrong. So what that does is it doesn't demotivate them if they've just gone and taken a chance, but it does encourage them to just continue on. In the middle here, we've got the Jeopardy game, which encourages them to do their best and try again if they get a question wrong. So it's just a series of true or false questions. On the right here, we've got the elevator game, which essentially asks learners to look at the picture on the left and see if it matches the criteria on the right, and then tap which criteria it does match. Once they've picked all the correct criteria, they move on to the next picture until the timer runs out. Over on the left here, we've got an example from Afterpay, which this is just a number template. So this is just an assessment template that's been gamified. So giving a small knowledge check, a little nudge in the middle of a lesson, but that is worth a couple of stars, is a really motivating factor to move on. So learners are getting that feedback loop, like I'm being rewarded for doing this lesson. And that seems to be really effective when it comes to gamifying learning. In the middle here, we've got a chat template, which actually contextualizes what the learner is being asked. So someone asks a question and you have to give an answer, and it's contextualized in a 21st century way, which is really great for millennial learners. On the right here, we've got a reorder template, which is where you have a process or a procedure, and you have to drag the steps into the correct order. Now, the great thing about these reinforcement templates is they're not games. But what you can do is add timers and add stars and actually gamify them yourself as an author. It's a really good idea to give a little heads up that something is actually timed, or it's worth a lot of stars. And I'll show you how to do that in just a moment when we jump into the authoring tool. Over here is some introduction slides for some games. And the point I'm trying to make here is that it is really important to write very engaging copy when you're coming into these games. To encourage that flow, it's always important to let learners know what they're doing. And by writing really engaging copy that's also really closely linked to your brand identity, you can create some really effective introductions into each of the games. So over here on the left, we've obviously got the giant sub challenge for Subway. But here in the middle, it's a motorbike-based lesson. And so we're saying rev into the WR450F championships. And the copy here is, in all three cases, is telling you the same information. So it's giving you, introduction to the true or false game, and it's instructing you on what to do. But it's also closely linked to the brand identity, which really does set the scene for the facts that the learners are about to be presented. So it's a really important element that you adapt your copy appropriately for the audience you're about to be quizzing or giving a reinforcement to. So let's jump into the authoring tool. We won't take questions quite yet. Sorry for bringing up that slide, but let's jump into the authoring tool and have a look at this lesson here. So this is our Adidas Predator 2019 lesson. So this is just a lesson for a pair of soccer boots, and it's aimed at retail employees, just giving them a brief primer. There are these new boots coming out. How do we sell them? How do we talk about them to customers? It's completely an example. So what I've done here is actually just created a image slide. Obviously, it doesn't slide because there's only one index card in it. So I've used a GIF here to quickly give some deep contextualization. So it's also giving a bit of motion to the slide. And it's encouraging, it's just giving our learners a little nudge saying that these next two questions about the control skin correctly score a total of, answer them correctly to score 5 stars. And then you just press continue to begin. So if we press continue here, the authoring tool is actually going to take me to the next slide. So what we've got to do now is we can actually set a timer. So since we primed our learners, they'll be pretty okay with having a bit of a time limit on the slide. So I have to do this in milliseconds. So if I set it to 10,000, it's actually 10 seconds. Not only that, but we can also add some stars to it. So we can make it be worth 3 stars. So let's say this question is quite in-depth. We could make it worth 3 stars. We could even, if we wanted, make it worth 20 stars. If you so choose, you can make it worth however many stars you want. But it's important to be consistent across your lessons with how many stars you generally are giving out. So it's timed, and it hides the appropriate answers until that little countdown has ended at the beginning. And so what we've done there is by just adding a timer and a couple of stars, we've instantly gamified a slide. And it's super easy to do. Comes up with a little message telling them that they're too slow, and then they can just move on. They can always come back and try again. Same thing with this slide. So we have a strikeout template here. So what I'm going to do here is change that to a 10-second countdown as well. They can read the sentence beforehand, but they can't actually interact with it. And once the timer finally sort of activates and the countdown ends, they can go ahead and cross it out, press OK, I'm done, and try their luck, see if they're correct. And of course, that was correct. The other thing you can change, not only can you change the number of stars, but you can actually change the question weight. So learners aren't prompted to this. What this does is it actually changes the importance in that final score of this question. If you have a final question that really is worth a lot, you can change that weight to 2 or 3. And what the system does is it adds up all those weights and makes a percentage out of them. So essentially questions that are worth more are scored higher than other questions. So you can have a play around with that. And what that does is it basically just changes that score. So when it finally comes to those leaderboards, their score really reflects what they do actually know in those hard questions, more so than just your typical like fill in the blanks or something that's super easy. And once again, it's completely up to the author how they want to do that. You don't even have to do that. That's completely up to you. Coming here now to an actual game template. So this is quite a long game. That hasn't quite loaded. I think it's just we've changed a few things without pressing save. So let me just save that. There we go. It's popped up. So we come over here to a game. So it's the Predator Finals. And we're asked which statements are true, which statements are false. We're prompted that we have 30 seconds. So since this is quite a long slide, what we've done is we've actually made it worth 7 stars down here. But in order for the learner to actually be able to earn all stars, I'm going to make the all-star score 7,000. So now, to give you an example, if I score 3,000 points, I'm only going to earn 3 stars. Same as if I earn 4,000 points or earn 4 stars. So it's a sliding scale. And that also encourages learners to go back, and repeat the information as they go. So those are just a few of the ways within the authoring tool that you can gamify your lesson and you can enable that gamification on a lesson level. And as you can see here, once the game ends, we're actually given this huge play again button, which is much bigger than the move on button. And that's no accident. So what we want to encourage is people going back and doing a reinforcement again. So let's now have a look at a new feature that we have called leaderboards. And over here, leaderboards comes under the Engage tab here. I just preloaded it just to make the presentation a bit quicker for everyone. But in the Engage tabs, go to leaderboards. And what we can do is actually create a new leaderboard. So we've already got a few preloaded here. So we've got some, this is a dummy account, of course. But we can go in and create a new leaderboard. And let's just call it global. Now, if I just tick learner access, and then I make it a group leaderboard, because we're going to pit stores against each other instead of pitting individuals against each other. I can set it to global. And then we can change the schedule as well. So I can make it just for one day, or I can make it end next year. It's completely up to me. So I can, I just can't start it before today. That's the only thing. So it's got to start now and end whenever. You can also set it to start perhaps when your program starts or something like that. And it's only going to count scores that were accrued during that time. So if I hit save now, what I can do is actually come over and see the winners. So I can see the winners of this, this leaderboard quickly on the authoring tool if I want. But if I'm a learner, I've been given learner access to it. So what I can actually do is come over here to my iPad, and up here I've got leaderboard, and obviously this would look slightly different on a phone, but everything will look very, very similar. So I can come over here to leaderboards, and I've got my Melbourne leaderboard that I can look at. But then I can just switch to my global leaderboard and see how I'm ranking among the other stores. And as a manager, as a store manager, for example, you can say to your Melbourne team, you know, we want to be number one in the leaderboard. If you guys get us number one in the leaderboard, then we're all going out for drinks on Friday night or Saturday night, you know, 3 rounds on me or something like that. And you can really encourage your learners just with a real world reward, or you can give them anything you want. You can just give them praise and recognition, which is really important. So not only can you see those wider teams, like they're essentially user groups, but you can actually see how individuals are performing. So if you see that, you know, Ramona here hasn't completed any lessons because her score is still on 0, you can encourage her to go in and complete the lessons by saying, hey, look, you know, Tori's got so many points on you, you know, why aren't you going in and completing your lessons? And that doesn't actually have to be in person. What we can do is jump over to a user page, and a new feature as well is custom push notifications. So essentially, if I just say, you know, you're in the lead, Tori, I can send her a custom message. I can also send a custom message to the entire user group and say, you know, Tori's in the lead, everyone, catch on up. So here we go. I can see my push notification up here in, you know, just in the notification tray where anything else will come up. So your Instagram notifications, your Facebook notifications, and it will all pop up just up here. Right now we're on an iPad, but it would look the same on a phone, an Android device, or an Apple device. So another great feature that's really important for gamification is our new Brain Boost feature. And Brain Boost is essentially spaced repetition. So that's what we're calling it in the administration panel. If you enable spaced repetition, you only have to tick this box. And then you can jump over to courses. And essentially it's enabled by default on all your courses. But what you can actually do is jump into a course, click on spaced repetition, and you can see all the slides that are participating in spaced repetition. And perhaps there's one that doesn't make sense out of context. So these are going to be shown without the rest of the lesson. So it's really important to keep this in mind. Just quickly go through your questions, make sure they all make sense within context, and untick the ones that don't. And it's as simple as that, just unticking them. And then you're ready to go with Brain Boost. So what Brain Boost looks like on a device is actually, if we open up Ed, and just up here we've got a Brain Boost tab. Not only is there a tab, but they're also going to get push notifications, much like these ones here. You're going to get push notifications every day for Brain Boost saying that there's a quiz available. So down here we can see last time that we scored 28% on this Brain Boost. So our goal here is obviously to do a bit better than that, isn't it? So when we start our Brain Boost quiz, it's going to tell us what courses are going to appear in this Brain Boost. I can press continue. It'll prime me on what frame of mind I should be in. So right now I'm thinking about cybersecurity. And obviously if you're just doing retail lessons, it'll show you slides from one course, and then it'll just move on and through the different types of slides. So we can answer this and then press OK, I'm done. I'm just going to quit out of this. But at the end of this, what it does is it gives us a score. So I didn't do very much for the quiz, so it's given me 6%. But as you can imagine, it'll give you a score at the end of every day you do it. And your goal is to just keep upping that score until you're eventually at 100%. Now, this quiz is unique for every learner. So it's completely automatically generated by an algorithm. So we're using the same algorithm as Duolingo to generate a daily quiz that's unique to each learner. So I did mention that we also have prizing, and you're probably wondering what these stars are eventually going towards. Let me just jump back into the app. So we do have this area here called the star bar. And so that's configurable in two options. So you can either have a slot machine like we do here, or you can have a auction. And so what we can do in the pricing tab is actually give out some real rewards for learners. And so these could be iTunes cards, Best Buy gift cards, for example, Amazon gift cards, that sort of thing. So there's a huge variety of different prizes you can give out. So what I'm going to do here is create a new prize to show you how easy it is to add a different type of prize. I'm just going to call this Uber gift card. And then give it a little description just so learners know what they're winning. Then we can upload a thumbnail. I don't have one at the moment, but you can imagine you just upload a little picture of the Uber card, and then you add a field. So this is basically going to be a code prize, but we can also give out URLs. So say there's a web page where they have to go to redeem it, and then we just call that redemption code. And then we add a sender's email address, so that can be your company's email address, so that the learners are going to see that from their company. And then we can test it, but essentially it's all ready to go. If I jump back over here into the to the prize draw menu, what I can do is create a new draw. Then I can say Uber prizes, and then I can add a new prize. And essentially all I'm going to do there is upload those codes from the Uber gift vouchers I bought from whatever website, upload those codes super simply into Ed. And then we come back to the iPad. And as a learner, I can spin to win and see if I've won. Obviously here I'm not going to win because there's no prizes available. You can imagine how easy it is to spend away those stars. So the probability is going to manage itself that for whatever prizing duration you set, the prizes are going to be given out evenly along that duration. So have no fear of you going over budget. It's only going to give out prizes you load into the system within that time. So if you need any help with pricing, it is something to talk to your client success manager with. But essentially, it's very, very easy to set up pricing. So I can see that the little question flashy thing is going off a lot. So I guess I'm just going to jump into answering some questions. If you do have a question, please feel free to just leave it in the chat window. Let's jump into some questions. So